I call the Honourable Member Nikki Kay.
Mr Speaker, look, I'm very pleased to be speaking on this piece of legislation in the third reading. Can I acknowledge Tuaroa Flavel, Māori Party MP for Wairaki? Can I also acknowledge Nikki Wagner, the Chair of the Select Committee? I think, as has already been mentioned by my colleague, the Honourable Nick Smith, I think this House should pay tribute when a local member comes to this Parliament, because often there's been a huge amount of work that we don't see behind the scenes to liaise with groups. In this particular instance, obviously local iwi, and we have heard right throughout the Select Committee process, but also in the advice from the Department of Internal Affairs in a submission by Ngā Pōtiki, actually that for some members, while this might seem a tidying up of the statute books, for other members in the community, for iwi, there is actually quite a bit of cultural significance in this bill. And I want to briefly touch on how much I understand, particularly when it comes to water, the importance of cultural significance. And obviously we are dealing with wastewater, but I know as a member responsible for a large part of the Hauraki Gulf, the issues that often come up, both in terms of the community, but local iwi, around recognising that cultural significance of some of our conservation areas, and particularly when it comes to water. So as has already been mentioned, it's fairly straightforward. The Select Committee recommended that we repeal the Act, but that we also insert a new Clause 5, which is a sunset clause. We know the history. The Act was transferred part of the seabed of Tauranga Harbour to Maunganui Borough Council. We know that the area authorised to be transferred under the Act was 73.5 hectares, but actually the Council reclaimed approximately only 23.5. I again have gone back through my research, and I think Ngā Pōtiki summed it up with the reasons that my colleague Jack and Dean mentioned in terms of supporting this bill. I think firstly, the Tauranga City Council has no intention to further reclaim the land. Secondly, the repeal of this bill will provide, and the term that's used in the Ngā Pōtiki submission is vindication for some of the members of the community who did protest against the original Act. And then the third thing is around that cultural significance and healing of the wounds and of past conflicts between Ngā Pōtiki and Tauranga City Council. Again, as well, I would just mention that on this side of the House, in terms of local government, we have a view that if we want to have good, harmonious relationships between central and local government, then there does need to be a greater focus on both in terms of shared infrastructure, but also in terms of reducing debt so that there are better relationships in the community in general. Just coming back to the bill, I think it has been a really collaborative process on Local Government and Environment Select Committee. I think the Chair has done an outstanding job. I think the local member has done a huge amount of work behind the scenes in terms of both the research, and we've seen it through the Department of Internal Affairs and their work on this bill. I commend this bill to the House because I think not only does Tauranga City Council have no intention to reclaim the land, but actually there is a cultural significance in passing this legislation to the House. So I just end my speech by saying, I acknowledge Ngā Pōtiki, I acknowledge Tauranga City Council, and I acknowledge the Select Committee for their work on this bill, and I commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
I call the... Is a member calling? I call the Honourable Member